Miss, keep her still. She's resisting. I'm 5. I want daddy. Protocol is protocol. She's a security risk. The fluorescent lights inside gate C-27, Dallas-Fort Worth Airport, hum like a warning. Travelers froze mid-stride. A little girl, small braids with pink beads, unicorn backpack still on, sat trembling as a federal air marshal named Scott Delaney fastened cold metal cuffs around her wrists. She couldn't even lift her hands to wipe her own tears. Her name was Lila Carter, and today was supposed to be a simple flight to Denver to visit her grandparents. Her mother, Grace Carter, stood a foot away, shaking, voice barely holding. Marshal Delaney, she's 5. She was scared of the takeoff. That's it. Please. Delaney didn't look at her. His badge caught the overhead light, a sharp glint across the shocked faces watching. She refused seatbelt compliance and struck an attendant. He said evenly, though the strike had been nothing more than a panicked flail, the kind every parent recognizes. A man nearby whispered, "This can't be real." Another stepped back and raised his phone. The cabin door remained open. The air smelled of recycled carpet and hesitation. A child, small enough to nap on her mother's lap, now sat cuffed like a threat to national security. Grace knelt beside Lila, voice thin but steady. "Baby, look at Mommy. Breathe with me, okay?" Lila's chest hitched. I'm sorry." Delaney sighed, as though inconvenienced by compassion. "We'll wait for Denver authorities to receive her on landing. Until then, she remains restrained." Order of command. A ripple of anger traveled down the aisle. Passengers exchanged looks, some frightened to intervene, others furious but silent. A gray-haired woman in row 9 whispered a prayer. Then the flight attendant's radio crackled, slicing the tension. "Captain requesting update. But attention, all passengers, we've been informed that someone named Marcus Carter is en route to the jet bridge. Urgent priority status." Grace's head snapped up. She knew that voice. That name was not just her ex-husband. Marcus Carter was the founder of Carter Horizons, one of the most powerful privately held tech firms in the United States. His company built systems that half the airport relied on to scan passengers. And he was Lila's father. Out in the terminal, heavy shoes pounded the polished floor. A deep voice cut through the murmur. "Move. That's my daughter." The air marshal stiffened. Grace whispered Lila's name again, this time hope beneath the tremor. The door to the cabin opened. A man stepped in, and everything on Flight 482 was about to change. Enjoying this? Tap subscribe for tomorrow's story. Marcus Carter filled the doorway of the cabin, not because he was tall, though he was, but because of the way the air shifted when he entered. The hum of conversation dropped. The captain, standing just inside the cockpit, stepped aside without being asked. Marcus's eyes found the cuffs first. Then he saw the tiny wrists inside them. "Lila." His voice cracked on the second syllable. Lila's head jerked up. The pink beads in her braids clicked softly as she turned. "Daddy." Grace was already on her feet. "Marcus, I called you." They wouldn't listen. Marcus moved down the aisle, one hand on the seatbacks to steady himself. He wore a dark blazer over a simple gray shirt, but it was the airport-issued security badge clipped to his lapel that people noticed, laminated with a bold red stripe that most travelers never see. Air Marshal Scott Delaney stepped between Marcus and the child. "Sir, I need you to stop right there. This is an active security matter." Marcus stopped, but only by inches. "That security matter is my 5-year-old daughter," he said quietly. "Explain why she's in handcuffs." Delaney's jaw set. She refused to follow safety instructions before takeoff and became physically disruptive. Under federal guidelines, Federal guidelines don't say you put metal on a kindergartner, Marcus cut in, still calm. Not without a parent's consent. Not without a juvenile specialist. Where is your supervisor? The passengers leaned closer, pretending not to stare. A man in a ball cap lowered his phone, suddenly self-conscious. A woman in the middle seat clutched her purse, torn between fear and outrage. Grace wiped beneath Lila's eye with the side of her thumb, careful not to brush the cuff. She was scared. She gets nervous at takeoffs if I'm not next to her. I asked to switch seats. The attendant said no. Lila tried to climb out. That's all. Marcus heard the words, but his gaze never left Delaney. Did she hurt anyone? He asked. Delaney hesitated, just long enough to be noticed. She struck an attendant. Grace shook her head. Her hand flew up. It barely touched the woman's arm. Marcus took a slow breath. He'd spent years in rooms where people understated harm. Now he was watching it happen to his child. Behind him, the captain spoke up, voice cautious. Sir, we're already delayed. We have a departure slot in 15 minutes. If we miss it, this flight may be grounded for hours. Maybe canceled. The word canceled made the cabin rustle. People had connections. Jump. Appointments. A murmur of impatience moved through the rows, tangling with the simmering tension. Marcus glanced back at them, all these strangers, watching his family's breaking point like a live broadcast. He knew exactly how fast a story like this could spread. His company had built the analytics systems that tracked aviation incidents in real time. He'd seen numbers attached to human pain. He turned to Grace. How long has she been like this? Too long, Grace whispered. They said she'd stay cuffed until Denver. Marcus's hand closed into a fist, then opened again. No, that ends now. Delaney squared his shoulders. With respect, sir, you don't give orders on this aircraft. I do. Marcus's gaze dropped once more to the badge on his own lapel, the one that said he wasn't just any passenger or any parent. When he lifted his eyes, they were steady. Then let me introduce myself properly, he said. My name is Marcus Carter, and you're about to wish you'd handled this differently. A ripple of recognition passed through the cabin as the name landed. Not every passenger knew who Marcus Carter was, but the reaction of the flight crew told the story. The captain blinked once, slowly, as if recalculating his next several hours. Delaney didn't move. His posture was textbook firm. His hand hovered near his belt, close to radio but not touching. He had authority written into policy. Marcus had authority written into infrastructure. Grace rose, steadier now, drawing herself between Lila and the Marshal. Marcus isn't here to fight you. He just wants his daughter safe. We all do. Marcus faced Delaney again. Protocol protects people. It is not meant to humiliate a child. You know that. Delaney's expression remained unreadable. Emotional appeals won't change safety requirements. Marcus's voice stayed level. Then tell me the exact code that authorizes restraints on non-threatening minors without guardian consent. Silence. The passengers listened harder. Delaney opened his mouth, but Marcus continued softly. I'm not here to embarrass you. I know your job carries risk. I respect that. But I also know overreach when I see it. Lila shifted in her seat. The cuffs clinked against her armrest, a sound too big for such a tiny body. Grace bent to meet her eyes. Baby daddy's here. You're not alone. Marcus scanned the cabin, the hunched shoulders, the held breath, the fatigue of strangers forced into witness. He raised his voice a notch, not loud, but clear. My daughter had a fear response. That is not a crime. If procedure was misunderstood, we fix it. If there was panic, we address it. But you will remove those cuffs. The logic was calm. The father was not. A young flight attendant, pale with tension, finally spoke. Marshal Delaney, maybe we could reassess. Delaney shot her a look sharp enough to stop her mid-sentence. The matter is closed. She remains restrained until landing or transfer. Marcus stepped closer, close enough that the Marshal could see the exhaustion behind his eyes. I promised her I would always show up, he said quietly. You have children, Marshal. Delaney didn't answer. Then you understand, Marcus continued. Fear can make a child lash or cry or cling, but fear doesn't make them a threat. How we respond, that defines us. A woman 3 rows back called out gently. He's right. She's just a little girl. Another voice joined. We're willing to wait if it means doing this humanely. And another. No child should sit cuffed for hours. Delaney stiffened, jaw tight. The public eye was shifting. The power balance had begun to tilt. Marcus saw it. Grace felt it. Lila, sensing something softening, leaned toward her mother. The Marshal finally spoke, controlled but thinning. Even if I were to consider release, I would need authorization from. He stopped, because Marcus reached into his blazer and produced something few civilians ever carried. A security directive card, slim and metallic, embossed with clearance credentials issued through federal contract partnership. A quiet symbol of influence. He didn't flash it. He simply held it where Delaney could see. The Marshal's eyes narrowed, calculation working behind them. Marcus's tone was gentle. You don't have to be the villain in this story. You can choose mercy. For a long moment, no one moved. Then Delaney lifted his radio slowly. But whether he was calling to release the child or escalate further, no one yet knew. Delaney pressed the radio button, his voice low and controlled. Control, this is Marshal Delaney on Flight 482. I need supervisory clearance for a juvenile restraint decision. Passenger identified as minor, age 5. Static crackled back through the small speaker. Passengers leaned toward the sound, breath held like shared oxygen. Grace squeezed Lila's knee. Almost there, sweetheart. Marcus didn't look away from Delaney, but his eyes softened briefly when Lila glanced up at him, hope flickering like a fragile flame. The reply came through the radio, faint but clear enough to reach the nearest Rose. Copy. Stand by. Reviewing report. Stand by. 2 words that stretched across the cabin like a drawn bowstring. The captain cleared his throat, stepping into the aisle. Ladies and gentlemen, while this matter is resolved, please remain seated. We appreciate your patience. His tone was practiced calm, but his eyes betrayed worry. A late departure was one thing. A security incident was something else entirely. Marcus slowly lowered into the seat beside his daughter, Grace on the other side, creating a small circle of protection. He didn't touch the cuffs, but his gaze rested on them long enough that every passenger around could feel the weight of what they meant. Tell me what happened, he said softly. Grace exhaled. They wouldn't let me switch seats. Lila panicked when the engine started. She tried to get free. The attendant called for security. Delaney moved fast, too fast. He said noncompliance triggers containment authority. Marcus nodded once, absorbing each detail. He turned to Lila, voice quieter. Did you feel scared? She nodded, lip trembling. I couldn't breathe. I wanted Mommy. Marcus's jaw tightened, not in anger, but in realization. Panic is not rebellion. Fear is not threat. The radio crackled again. Flight 482, control here. Verification pending. Do not remove restraints. Repeat, do not remove restraints without escalation review. A hush fell like frost. Delaney's shoulders set. He had what he needed, permission to maintain the status quo. But passengers didn't sit quiet this time. A man in row 4 stood halfway, gripping his seat back. This is wrong. She's a child. A grandmother across the aisle followed. We'll wait an hour if we must. Let the little one breathe free. Even the flight attendant who'd been silenced earlier stepped forward, voice steadier now. Marshal Delaney, I was there. She was frightened. Not aggressive. The Marshal's gaze flicked across the rising descent. His authority, once absolute, now balanced on the edge of public perception. Marcus rose again, slow and deliberate. Marshal, the directive card I carry grants me access to oversight communication. I can request immediate external review. Quietly, he paused. Or publicly. Delaney hesitated. Marcus held his eyes, giving him room, not cornering, not shaming, just offering a way out. But tension is not story's end. A new voice sounded from behind the Marshal. Calm, firm. Marshal Delaney, step aside. Heads turned. A woman in a navy blazer stood at the doorway, airport credentials displayed, not flashy but unmistakably high tier. Evelyn Brooks, deputy director of terminal security, had arrived. Marcus exhaled once. Grace's fingers trembled around Lila's. Evelyn's gaze took in the scene. The child, the cuffs, the silent cabin, the hovering radio still warm in Delaney's hand. Her voice was even. I need a full explanation. Now, the storm had not ended. It had just gained a witness with power. Every eye locked onto Evelyn Brooks as she approached down the narrow aisle. She walked with a measured calm. No hurry, no fear, just the steady presence of someone used to fires and people who start them. Her badge glinted once beneath the overhead light, then settled against her blazer like a sealed verdict. She stopped beside Lila's row. Her voice softened. Sweetheart, can you look at me? Lila lifted her head slowly, cheeks streaked with dried tears. Evelyn's expression changed. Less official, more human. Thank you, she said softly, then straightened. Marshal Delaney report. Delaney cleared his throat. Minor refused to stay seated. Attempted to leave restraint. Contact was made with flight attendant. I applied detainment protocol under non-compliance guidelines. Was threat assessed? Evelyn asked. Yes, Delaney replied, though a beat too late. Evelyn's gaze sharpened. Threat level. Delaney paused. The cabin seemed to breathe in. He finally said, low. Passengers murmured. Marcus narrowed his eyes, marked the word. Low threat, Evelyn repeated. Yet you used metal restraints on a juvenile. The marshal's shoulders lifted defensively. Procedure supports detainment when safety is compromised. Evelyn stepped closer, voice still even. Safety is not the same as order. And order is not the same as force. A subtle shift passed through the cabin, relief, maybe, or the first hint of reckoning. Marcus recognized it. He'd seen boardrooms tilt like this before. One question, one pause, and truth begins to surface. He spoke gently. Director Brooks, may I offer context? She turned to him. You may. Marcus gestured to Lila. She experiences anxiety during takeoff. Her mother requested to change seats, was denied. A frightened child reached for safety. That is not rebellion, it's instinct. Evelyn listened without interrupting. Grace squeezed Lila's shoulder, grateful for someone finally hearing. The silence felt fragile. Delaney's pride hung in it like glass. Then Evelyn asked the question that mattered. Was de-escalation attempted before restraints? Delaney opened his mouth, stopped, closed it again. The truth was no. Passengers exchanged glances. A man whispered, There it is. Evelyn nodded slowly. I thought so. Grace let out a breath she'd been holding for far too long. But before hope could fully bloom, Evelyn lifted a hand. This isn't resolved yet, she said. A release requires supervisory override, but reviewing this decision takes time. Too much time for a child to wait. Marcus stepped forward. Then may I request immediate review under Section 14, Compassionary Adjustment Clause? Delaney stiffened. Evelyn reacted differently. Her eyebrow lifted. You know Section 14? Marcus didn't boast. I helped consult on technology integration for your department last year. We projected child safety reforms. I assumed implementation had begun. Evelyn nodded, slow, thoughtful. She wasn't intimidated. She was calculating. This was their second hint of the soon-coming twist. Passengers leaned forward. Lila's cuffs glinted faintly beneath the cabin lights, small metal circles holding the entire plane emotionally captive. Evelyn finally exhaled. If I override protocol, I take responsibility. My badge, my job, my name on the paperwork. I need to be certain. She looked at Grace, at Marcus, at the child between them. Tell me, she said gently, what happens if I uncuff her? Marcus answered without hesitation. She'll breathe again. Evelyn rested her hand lightly on the armrest beside Lila, half official, half maternal. She reached for her radio. Whether she would speak release or refusal. The entire cabin balanced on that 1 second of air. The radio felt heavy in Evelyn Brooks' hand, a small device with power to calm or ignite. Her thumb rested on the transmit switch, unmoving. Every passenger leaned into the moment like an invisible wire pulled them forward. Control, she said finally, voice steady as poured stone. I'm authorizing temporary restraint removal, pending compassionate review. Initiating Section 14. A gasp rippled through the cabin, quiet but unmistakably relieved. Delaney stepped forward. Director Brooks. She lifted her palm. This is authoritative action under discretionary jurisdiction. Stand down, Marshal. He obeyed, but tension clung to him like a second uniform. Marcus watched him closely. He saw the kind of man who believed rule was safety, even when rule forgot humanity. Grace knelt and held Lila as Evelyn produced a tiny key. Metal clicked, soft but echoing. When the cuffs fell away, Lila's wrists were small, faintly red. Grace kissed each one like a prayer. Marcus swallowed hard. Thank you. But Evelyn didn't smile. We're not finished. She turned to Marcus. You said you want this to end with humanity, she said. Then I need transparency. Your directive clearance card, why do you have it? Standard consultation doesn't grant that level. Passengers shifted, suddenly curious. The badge Marcus carried, the subtle power, now demanded explanation. Grace looked at him, confusion slowly surfacing. Marcus? He hesitated. Not out of guilt, but out of awareness. Truth, when spoken, changes direction. He met Evelyn's eyes. Because I hold majority ownership of Horizon Federal Systems. A stunned silence washed across the cabin. Horizon Federal Systems, parent company to Carter Horizons, quietly contracting with aviation and security networks across the country. Not just a tech business. Infrastructure. The unseen architecture behind clearance scans, watch lists, restraint protocols, everything that had led to this moment. Marcus didn't say it with arrogance. He said it like a burden he lived with. Evelyn exhaled slowly. So you're not just a consultant? No, Marcus said softly. I write policy. Or at least, I sign what policy becomes. Passengers stared as realization bloomed. This wasn't just a father confronting abuse of authority. This was a man confronting the unintended consequences of his own system. Grace's voice trembled. Marcus, did your company authorize this procedure? He closed his eyes, the weight of the moment pressing into him. We approved broad detainment discretion years ago. We meant it for real threats. We didn't foresee, he gestured Delilah, small, shaken, but now freed. We didn't foresee this, a truth that struck deeper than any badge. Evelyn's gaze softened, not pity, but understanding. Then what happens next is more than personal. Marcus nodded. This isn't about punishing a marshal. It's about fixing what I helped build. Delaney looked stunned, not angry, just suddenly small against the machinery of authority he thought he controlled. Marcus leaned forward. Director Brooks, I want immediate review of juvenile restraint language. We rewrite it today. Start with child-first protocol. Clear steps for de-escalation before force. Evelyn considered him. The plane waited like held breath. And if control denies, she asked. Marcus lifted his phone, thumb hovering over an unsent message, the draft of a public statement. Then this story leaves this cabin. A collective shiver moved through the aisle. Power had flipped, quietly but absolutely. Evelyn nodded once. Very well. We begin now. The child was free. The system that bound her was next. Evelyn Brooks stepped aside so Marcus could sit beside Lila properly for the first time. She leaned into him, head resting against his side like she'd been waiting for that space. All safety, no chains. Grace stroked her daughter's hair, pink beads ticking softly like time measured in hope. The cabin exhaled as though oxygen returned. But peace wasn't the twist. Power, when freed, moves outward. Evelyn raised her radio again, voice crisp. Control, this is Deputy Director Brooks. I am invoking on-site review authority with high-priority stakeholder involvement. Control answered with tight caution. Acknowledged. Hold position. Review in motion. But then the subtle shift. The captain's voice came over the PA, tone more strained than before. Ladies and gentlemen, Control is requesting all passengers temporarily disembark for further evaluation. We may experience extended delay. A wave of frustration rolled through the cabin. Some groaned aloud. A man shook his head. A woman muttered, "We did the right thing. Why punish us?" Marcus stood slowly, not angry, but resolute. This flight doesn't need evacuation. It needs conversation. Evelyn looked at him sharply. Marcus, this could escalate beyond our control. But Marcus already understood the stakes. If everyone left the plane, momentum died. Witnesses scattered, and the problem became paperwork instead of reform. Lila's cuffs would become a footnote, not a lesson. He turned to Grace. Do you trust me? Grace met his eyes. Years of separation, co-parenting, mistakes, and love all folding into one moment. She nodded. Yes. He faced the passengers. My company helped write parts of the system that allowed this. I can't erase that today, but I can change what we do next. If we step off this jet, this story disappears into reports. If we stay calmly, peacefully, we become the reason policy changes for every frightened child after this. The plane was silent, listening. Grace stood beside him, voice steady, mother strong. We aren't refusing safety. We're requesting fairness. We will sit. We will wait. With dignity. One by one, slow as dawn but unstoppable, passengers replaced anxiety with purpose. We'll stay, the man in Rover said firmly. We'll stay, echoed the grandmother. A quiet chorus answered as feet remained planted, seatbelts clicked gently, shoulders lifted. A peaceful sit-in. Evelyn watched stunned, not by defiance, but by unity. A civilian organized hold is unusual, she said carefully, but not unlawful if peaceful. Delaney stared, shaken, not outraged. His authority had shifted from enforcement to reflection. I never meant harm, he whispered to no one in particular. Marcus approached him, not victorious, but human. Then help us fix what went wrong. Join the review. Your experience matters. Delaney blinked. He wasn't the villain now. He was a man offered a way forward. He nodded. And in that moment, systems bent, not broken, but flexible enough to reform. Evelyn relayed the update to control. Passenger group elects to remain seated. De-escalation successful. Proceed with on-flight review. Then control responded, begrudging but compliant. Approved. Submit revision report with stakeholder signatures. Juvenile restraint protocol suspended pending reevaluation. Suspended. A single word with generational weight. Grace sat again, pulling Lila close. Marcus took the seat beside them, not separate, not distant, family. Evelyn tucked the removed cuffs into an evidence pouch. This is where change begins, she said softly. Not with outrage. With unity. The hum of the cabin settled into a strange, peaceful quiet. Not complacency, purpose. Passengers murmured with gentle steadiness, offering snacks to Lila, tissues to Grace, respectful nods to Marcus. A few even shook Delaney's hand, surprising him into awkward gratitude. Evelyn stood by row 12, tablet in hand, drafting the preliminary suspension notice. Each keystroke felt like a turning wheel. Marcus watched, thoughtful, not triumphant, but humbled by the scale of what was beginning. The captain stepped forward, voice softer than before. Mr. Carter, this could make headlines within hours. Are you ready for that? Marcus smiled faintly. It's not about headlines. It's about making sure no child sits in chains for being afraid. The captain nodded, something like respect lighting his features. He addressed the passengers over the intercom again. Thank you for your patience. We will resume preparation for departure shortly. Our team is coordinating with ground security and air traffic control for clearance. A restrained cheer spread through the plane. Light, relieved. Evelyn approached Marcus. I'll file the suspension immediately. The new protocol will require phased review, input from legal, psychological, and family advocacy groups. You'll be asked to participate. Marcus met her gaze. I will. Not as CEO. As a father. Delaney stepped forward then, clearing his throat. He didn't look like the stern lawman who first snapped the cuffs shut. He looked like a man who'd spent the last hour seeing a mirror held up to his authority. I want to be on that review too, he said. If restraint is used too quickly, I need to learn. We all do. Grace looked at him, not forgiving all, but acknowledging the courage it took to say those words. Lila was scared. I hope you see that now. Delaney nodded. I do. Lila, a small voice wavering but brave, whispered. It hurt. His eyes softened, regret stark and human. I'm sorry, Lila. Grace kissed her daughter's forehead, pride washing through her like warm light. The cabin seemed to breathe with her, mothers, fathers, grandparents, strangers, each understanding something about fear, authority, and second chances. Evelyn finalized her report, then spoke clearly for the cabin to hear. Effective immediately, juvenile restraint protocol is suspended pending reform. This decision will be reviewed and documented, with transparency to the public. Passengers applauded, not riotous, but firm, grateful. Change was not complete, but started. A seed planted in an unlikely place. The flight attendant who first spoke up approached Grace with 2 warm towels. For her wrists, she whispered gently. Grace thanked her, wrapping them around Lila's hands. The child sighed into the comfort, eyes fluttering closed. Marcus looked around the cabin, people united by something more than inconvenience. Compassion had become policy. Pain had become purpose. He sat back down beside his family, taking Lila's free hand carefully in his. Grace rested her head lightly against his shoulder. The divide that life had built between them felt smaller now, bridged by crisis, courage, and love for a child. The plane doors sealed. Engines hummed. The journey was finally ready to begin. Yet what waited in Denver and after was still unwritten. The plane climbed through soft afternoon clouds, the world below shrinking into patchwork calm. No more radios crackled. No tense standoffs. Just steady ascent and the gentle rhythm of flight. Lila slept with her head on Grace's shoulder, her small fingers curled loosely around Marcus's hand. No restraints, only touch. Grace watched her daughter breathe, each rise and fall proof of tenderness regained. Then she looked at Marcus. Years of complicated history flickered in her eyes. Marriage that ended, schedules that rarely aligned, visits traded across states. But today he showed up. Fully. Fiercely. Not with wealth or influence alone, but with heart. "You didn't have to come," she said softly. Marcus smiled. "I did. Not as a CEO. As her father." He brushed a stray braid bead from Lila's cheek. "I've been busy building systems. I forgot systems affect real lives. Today reminded me." Grace nodded, eyes warm. "Maybe we can rebuild something too." "Not us," she hesitated. "Just trust." For her. Marcus breathed out slowly. "I'd like that. Not pushing. Just open." Across the aisle, Evelyn reviewed drafts of new protocol language. Every so often, she glanced at Lila, the reason for each typed sentence. Delaney sat nearby, quietly helping, offering practical notes about real-life scenarios. Two people who earlier stood on opposite sides now collaborated over shared responsibility. Minutes passed, peaceful as snowfall. The captain's voice rose calmly over the speakers. "Ladies and gentlemen, we thank you for your cooperation today. We expect an on-time arrival in Denver. It's been a privilege to witness such grace and patience from all on board." Passengers exchanged small smiles, united now not by conflict, but by what they protected. As trays were lowered for beverage service, the grandmother in row 9 leaned toward Grace. "You did right, dear. You stayed kind even when you hurt." Grace blinked back emotion. "Thank you." She wasn't proud of the fear she felt, but she was proud of the way she held her daughter through it. Marcus rested his hand lightly on Grace's, not ownership, partnership. "I'll take the lead on policy review," he said quietly. "Public transparency. Independent child advocates. Mandatory de-escalation training." He paused, voice gentler. "And travel accommodations for anxious minors. Lila won't be the only one who needs it." Grace smiled, relieved tears catching light. "Other parents will thank you for that." Marcus shook his head slightly. "Well, thank us. Everyone here was part of this." As if on cue, small things began happening. Passengers asked to sign support statements. The flight attendant gently offered Lila apple juice when she woke. Delaney asked Grace for feedback so he could approach future situations better. Not perfection. Progress. Lila stirred, blinking up. "Are we safe now?" Grace kissed her forehead. "Yes, baby. We're safe." Marcus added softly, "And we're going to make sure every kid like you is safe too." The plane curved gently toward the horizon, smooth, steady, confident. A new path. A better system. A family finding strength not in wealth or power, but in presence and accountability. Outside, sunlight spilled across the wing like a promise. They were not who they were at takeoff. They were more. 3 months later, Denver, Colorado. Summer air carried the scent of fresh-cut grass through the open windows of a modest community center near downtown. Folding chairs filled the meeting hall, though the atmosphere felt more like a gathering of neighbors than a policy summit. Parents with travel-stressed toddlers, off-duty flight attendants, airport staff, and security agents, a cross-section of ordinary lives shaped by one extraordinary day. At the front of the room, Marcus Carter stood beside Grace and Lila. A simple table held papers, not legal threats. The new Juvenile Passenger Compassion Protocol was ready for rollout. Clear steps for de-escalation, mandatory parental involvement, child safety consultants on call during flights, and a strict ban on restraints unless a juvenile posed imminent danger. No loopholes. No interpretation wide enough to swallow compassion. Reporters filled the back row, but the tone of the room felt intimate. Marcus spoke steady, eyes on the families rather than the cameras. This isn't about what happened to my daughter, he said. It's about preventing it from happening to anyone's. Fear is not misbehavior. Protection should not feel like punishment. Grace watched him with quiet pride. She hadn't expected them to become advocates, just parents trying to raise one brave little girl. But sometimes the smallest pane cracks open the biggest possibility. Lila sat between them, drawing butterflies on a coloring sheet. Pink beads traced soft music through the room as her braids moved. When Marcus finished speaking, she looked up, asked in a shy whisper, "Daddy, is the rule better now?" He knelt to meet her eyes. "Yes, you helped make it better." Lila smiled, a simple, unbroken smile, and handed him her picture. A butterfly, wings wide free. Nearby, Evelyn Brooks greeted attendees warmly. She had since been appointed to lead the agency's juvenile safety oversight team, a role born from accountability, not scandal. Marshal Delaney stood beside her, not disgraced, but improved. He spoke to parents about signs of child panic, ways to approach gently, how authority and empathy could coexist without conflict. He kept one item locked in a small presentation case, a pair of tiny metal cuffs. Not as punishment, as remembrance. He opened the case only once that day, showing the restraint that started it all. No spectacle, just truth. Marcus and Grace exchanged a glance. Pain acknowledged, not glorified. Lila peeked in and touched the edge of the velvet lining, then stepped back into her mother's arms. Grace whispered into her hair, "You're stronger than that metal ever was." Outside, the evening sun turned the sky honey gold, warm across the parking lot where parents buckled children into car seats without fear. Marcus locked the case after Delaney finished speaking, placed it gently into Evelyn's hands. This was no longer a symbol of failure. It was a reminder of what vigilance means. Lila tugged at both her parents' hands, pulling them toward the door. "Can we go for ice cream?" she asked, voice bright. Grace laughed softly. "Yes, sweet girl." Marcus opened the door, held it for both of them. No jet engines, no alarms, no restraints. Just the sound of children laughing in the play yard beside the building, free, loud, alive. Systems had changed, but more importantly, hearts had. They walked into the golden light together, not perfect, but whole, guided by a lesson earned dearly, shared widely, and never forgotten. Andy, thanks for watching.